So thanks for coming to our traffic council meeting. The beginning of the meeting, well, I guess we'll begin with introductions. I'm David Kozis. I'm the transportation coordinator from the Department of Public Works. I see that we're joined by other traffic council members, Captain Doucette from the Traffic Bureau, Isaac Prezant, he's our traffic engineer, Mitch Fishman, our citizen resident, and Jeremy Freudberg, our alternate citizen resident, also Councillor Downs. And our committee clerk tonight is Scott Matthews. I also see that we're joined by Alicia Bowman, Councillor Bowman from Ward 6.
And Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Kelly has joined us, Councillor Kelly from Ward 3. And we're going to begin with our first, actually, I'm going to introduce the first 3 items and then do a quick presentation for all 3. So our first item is TC 5223, David Kozis, Traffic Council Chair, requesting to remove the accessible parking space at 144 Webster Street from the TPR as it may no longer be needed. This is actually in Ward 3, I believe. Also, TC 5323, David Kozis, Traffic Council Chair, requesting to remove the accessible parking space on Kimball Terrace from the TPR as it may no longer be needed. And TC 5423, David Kozis, Traffic Council Chair, requesting to remove the accessible parking space at 62 Fellsmere Road from the TPR as it may no longer be needed. I think this is actually Ward 7. So we're just going to do all 3 of these. The first one, the accessible space at 144 Webster Street. So these are just accessible spaces that we put out onto the public streets when they're needed by residents. Every once in a while, we go through our list of official accessible spaces and see if they're still needed. When they're not needed, we take them out of the official regulations by going through this process. So we surveyed the residents around 144 Webster Street, found that the accessible space, that the sign that's there, the handicap sign, is no longer needed. So we could go ahead and remove it from our official regulations. But before I make a motion, is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment on this item? Okay. I see that we're also joined by Councillor Malachy from Ward 3. Okay, seeing no comments, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to remove the space on Webster Street. We have the language in front of us. It's TPR 906. And so I'll make a motion to approve the language of TPR 906 to remove that space. And any last comments? Okay. So Scott, you're our committee clerk. What we usually do is we do a roll call. So you would call each of us on traffic council and then we would vote. So would you be able to do a roll call?
Yep. Mr. Kozis?
Aye.
Mr. Prezant?
Aye.
Mr. Fishman?
Aye.
Councillor Downs?
Aye.
Mr. Doucette?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. So the next item is very similar. It's exactly the same thing. It was the accessible space on Kimball Terrace. Actually, it hasn't even been posted for many, many years, but it was still being carried on the books. So we are now recommending to remove it from the books. Any comments before we make a motion? Seeing none, I will make a motion to approve the language of TPR 907 to remove the accessible space on Kimball Terrace. And Scott, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kozis?
Aye.
Mr. Prezant?
Aye.
Mr. Fishman?
Aye.
Councillor Downs?
Aye.
Mr. Doucette?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Then the last one in this series is TC 5323. This is to remove the accessible space at 62 Fellsmere Road. Are there any comments from the public? Okay, I don't see any. So I am going to make a motion to approve the language of TPR 908 to remove that accessible space. And Scott, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kozis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Mr. Doucette.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And so we just need to wait for our 20-day appeals period. That would bring us through November 15th. After we get past November 15th, as long as there's no appeal, then those signs will be removed, any of them that are still in place. Okay, good. So our next item is TC 3523. This is David Kozis, Traffic Council Chair, on behalf of neighborhood residents, requesting to review and possibly change the parking regulations on Farwell Street to ensure safe access for buses and emergency vehicles. So this one looks familiar probably to all of us. We heard this item several months ago, and we'll just go through the presentation. We have some additional slides now. So this is, let me just move things around on my screen a little bit. Okay, so this is the location, Farwell Avenue, which hits North Street at 2 points. Okay, I have several photos to show. This is a view of Farwell Street looking south. We see North Street at the end. It's pretty narrow at this point. It's only 20 feet wide. Here's another photo from a little bit further to the north, looking at the same direction, looking southbound with North Street in the distance. Gets a little bit wider here, but still pretty narrow, only 22 feet wide. Then if you turn around and look the other way, looking to the north, here's what you would see. And then if you go all the way to the end and take the sharp left and then look back toward the curve, toward Farwell Circle, this is the view. It's still 22 feet wide at this point, so still pretty narrow. So the only existing parking regulation is shown on the screen now. It's just this area shown in red. Other than this one area in the middle of Farwell, right now you're allowed to park on both sides of the street, all the way from the beginning to the end. So what happened is several months ago, our transportation division received a request from a resident, didn't say their name at the time, to restrict parking on a portion of Farwell Street. They sent along a video showing a bus unable to pass through. So we took a look at it and we noticed that parking is not really restricted along most of the street, not along the curve or at the beginning of the street. So back in the summer, in July, we heard this item and Traffic Council voted to restrict parking, to sort of extend the restriction all the way down to North Street and also up and around the bend. So the whole west side and part of the south side would have no parking for safety reasons. So that was our vote, but we had a 20-day appeals period. This decision was appealed and it went to the Public Safety and Transportation Committee. I think it was only about a month ago that it was heard at PSNT. It was a pretty long discussion there. And then the decision was made to send it back to Traffic Council. Oh yeah, so that was on September 20th, with I think a request to do a little bit more data collection. So that's what we tried to do. So back in July, the recommendation was to restrict parking, something like you would see this type of sign on this utility pole. No parking anytime. The vote was to extend it around the curve and then all the way down to North Street. So we did some additional analysis. Right now, again, the no parking zone is only in the middle of the street on the west side. I tried to count how many cars could fit on either side of the street. So that first block of North Street, on the east side, there's space for about 4 vehicles to park. On the west side, about 3 vehicles would be able to park there. And then around the rest of the street, on the east and north side, there would be enough space for about 24 vehicles to park in between the driveways, etc. On the other side, if that no parking zone were to be removed, there is an ability to have more cars parking on that side. About 33 vehicles would be able to park on that side. However, that's where all the utility poles are and the fire hydrants are located. So like in this, here's an image that shows the west side with all the utility poles where we could hang the no parking signs. So that's something important to remember. So we did get input from the Newton Public Schools, the transportation director, Regina. She told us that there is a school bus that does go on that street. It picks up right on North Street, continues up Farwell to turn around. So it just goes with the 1 block on Farwell, then it turns right on Joseph Street, and then turns right again on Albemarle, and then back down to North Street. And she definitely does support restricting parking on one side of the street. We got input from the fire department, which we didn't have at the last meeting. So we actually have a video that was taken, and I can play this video. This shows 2 small cars or 2 city cars parked across from one another, and then what happens when the fire engine tries to get through. And I'll play this video. This is the thinnest of all the fire trucks that they have. If they have to send an outrigger to the street, it would be even 6 feet wider. And with parking on both sides, you couldn't even set up the outrigger. It's already extremely tight, they say. It would become even narrower with snow. And you can see even in this section of the street, the fire truck just cannot get through with 2 cars parked across from one another. This is this first block. Okay, then we took another video a little bit further up on the north side of Joseph. So here's a view. Here's a little video that we took. So you see the fire truck coming up the street. The 2 cars are parked, across from one another. Again, it's the thinnest truck that they have. And this is perfect weather conditions, no snow, small cars. And it's just very, very slow, even in ideal conditions for the fire truck to get through. Okay. So that shows the additional data that we collected. We do have 2 options to present tonight. We still believe that we need to restrict parking on one side of the street. It's a narrow street. We see that the fire truck can't get through or has a lot of difficulty getting through, even with ideal conditions. So even though there's more parking on the west side than on the east side of the street, we still do recommend restricting parking on the west side. We could use the existing utility poles. We wouldn't need to put a whole bunch of new poles on the street if we would have to do if we allowed parking on the west side and restricted it on the east side. So we're again making the same recommendation that we made at the last meeting to restrict parking along the whole west side and around the curve on the south side. So that is our preferred option. It was the same recommendation as last time. With the additional data that was collected, we still believe that this is the safest and a necessary option for public safety on the street. I'm almost done. we have a second option. This is not our preferred option, but I did go through the effort of creating an option number 2 that would maintain the existing restriction. So this is already in place, the no parking restriction in the middle of the street. And we would restrict parking just on that first block, the block that's only 20 feet wide, the block that the bus uses. Again, that is not the preferred option because we still think that there's a safety issue along the rest of the street and around the curve. So that's the presentation for this item. I'm gonna, I guess I'll call on Councilor Downs first.
Actually, you can wait on that. What I really wanted to say right off the bat is thank you for doing the additional analysis. I know we had heard a lot of concerns at the Public Safety and Transportation meeting and wanted to be absolutely sure about this. And I really appreciate all the extra work that went into this. It's quite compelling. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Downs. Okay, so now we'll open it up for the public. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this item? Now is your chance to raise your hand and we can call on you. Especially if we have any neighbors. And we have Sharon. Sharon, if you could unmute yourself and then please tell us your full name and your address for the record.
Sorry, I couldn't find unmute. My name is Sharon Hughes and I live at 50 Joseph Road, which is right on at the end of that first red line. I'll only make one point. There are some people who park on that end of the road near North Street, between North Street and Joseph Road. They live there. Because there are no sidewalks there, those people park pretty much off the street. On the other side of the street where you're proposing that parking be allowed, there are sidewalks and curbs, and therefore people obviously can't get off the street. So that's my only point.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I do see that we're joined by Councilor Lucas from Ward 2. So anyone else from the public wish to speak on this item?
I think I'm the only one from the public here from
Okay, so
that neighborhood.
I'm here. Can you hear me? My name is
yes,
Meredith.
but I don't see you.
Oh, hang on.
you
Let
could
me.
Say,
Can you see me now?
who's speaking, please?
My name's Meredith Duggan. I live in the apartment building on the
Okay.
curve. Sorry, I'm trying to turn my camera on.
It's okay. You don't need to if you don't want to, but we just need to know your address, please.
55 Farwell.
So go ahead, please.
I just wanted to say I appreciate the map and explaining. I just wondered, it is a bit of a burden, and I can see the safety issue and why this is needed. It is a burden on people like me in the apartment buildings. We're only allotted one parking space, and then we have the winter parking ban. So is there any plan to help people like me, particularly in the winter, to find alternate parking in the town?
So parking would still be allowed on the
But it would
east
be
side
much,
of Farwell
less.
Street, which is where most people are parking now. That would not change. So parking is not like you have a 2-hour limit or something. Parking is always available on the street, except overnight in the winter.
Yep.
And so we have the winter parking ban in place. Right now, as of now, there's a few public lots that that you could receive free passes to park in. I'm not sure where the closest one is to this location. Maybe Captain Doucette, can you think of where the closest public lot maybe in West Newton?
Cherry Street.
Yeah, Cherry and Elm is the closest
Okay.
one, quite far from
Right.
here.
Okay, so as of now, I mean, you have your one parking space, and then you have the opportunity to park the second vehicle for free overnight in the Cherry Street lot. That is our current citywide ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else from the public wish to speak? Okay, any members of traffic council wish to comment, or city councilors? Anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion. Motion to accept the preferred option,
Okay,
option 1.
so we have a motion made by Councilor Downs to approve TC 3523 option 1 as TPR 90909 as shown on slide 23. Any comments before Scott calls the roll? Okay, Scott, can you please call the roll on this one?
Mr. Kozis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Mr. Doucette.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Very good. Thank you all very much. And we're going to move on to the next item. If my slides advance. Okay. Okay, so again, I should say that we do have our appeals period. This item was appealed once already. If it's appealed again, it would go back to the Public Safety and Transportation Committee for further discussion. If we have no appeal before or as of November 15th, then after that, then we will see the additional signage be installed. So thank you. And we're going to move on now to TC 4923. This is Councilor Lucas requesting to switch the locations of the accessible parking space at 923 Washington Street, which is Grandma's Kitchen, with the metered parking space at 921 Washington Street, which is Rice Valley. So here's the location of the two parking spaces at 821 and 823 Washington Street. This is looking west toward Walnut Street. Here's a view of the spaces in the opposite direction. And so the request is, okay, so this, let me see, hopefully everyone can see the cursor. This is an accessible space right now. This is in-street dining at this metered space in front of it. So we have a metered space with seasonal in-street dining, an accessible space, and then a metered space. And so the request is to move the swap the accessible space and the metered space. Move the meter up, move the accessible sign back to the other side of the driveway in front of Rice Valley. The reason for that is to be able to allow in-street dining in front of Grandma's Kitchen. They want to be able to have in-street dining seasonally, and we can't allow that in an accessible space. We could allow it in a metered space, so that is the request. So our recommendation is to approve the request. We have the language that we can vote on to make that happen, which would be removing some of the existing technical restrictions and adding other ones with different distances. And that is the presentation. So we'll open it up for any public comment on this item. Anyone from the public or any city councilor wish to speak on this one? Councilor Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Kosis. I think you summed it up perfectly. It's removing the request is to remove the accessible stall so that Grandma's Kitchen, if they want to in the future, can do outdoor dining there on Washington Street. And for those who have not had any of the food, I highly recommend it. It is delicious. Just wanted to give them a plug. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Jeannie, our ADA coordinator.
Yeah, in theory, this sounds fine, but I don't understand why we'd be moving it until I imagine there's other approvals for outdoor dining in the street that need to be made, and if it's for this season or not. I'm just curious about that. Is the owner of Grandma's Kitchen here and can tell us a little bit more? Because I feel that this parking space is moving further away from the corner Washington and Walnut, and there's lots of businesses in that direction and more around the corner on Walnut and across the street from, from crossing Walnut over to the other corner of Washington and Walnut. So I don't know that we need to move it just in case. That's my question and my reservation on this.
I think that the reason that it was docketed, Jeannie, was because of the intent. I believe they do have the intent to go ahead and request and, ask for in-street dining. I think the process is that it's reviewed by DPW. If there isn't something impeding their frontage, if there's not a bus stop or an accessible space or something, or a no parking zone, if there's nothing blocking them from using the space, then it would typically be approved. So we do anticipate that they will be wanting to move forward with that in-street dining request. And the item was docketed. I didn't see any reason to hold it up.
Well, I mean, the season is getting colder. I just wanted to know, otherwise this would be a space that could be moved in March instead of now, for just to be closer to businesses. That's the point of all of these accessible on-street parking spaces in village centers, is to be, somewhat close to a bunch of businesses so that people don't have to walk too far. The other thought is, I assume the business already got permission from Rice Valley, because then it's in front of Rice Valley, who also might want to do outdoor dining. I'm just curious what happened there.
Well, I don't think that we've heard from Rice Valley any interest. They've never had in outdoor dining in front of their restaurant. Perhaps either Councilor Lucas or Councilor Bowman has more information to share. Councilor Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Kosis. Rice Valley, which is located next door, they have ample indoor dining. And I live around the corner and I walk past this block a lot. And whenever I look inside, it is, mostly empty. They have ample space for indoor dining, whereas Grandma's Kitchen does not. They have maybe 5 tables only. So space inside Rice Valley it's a non-issue.
Thank you, Councilor Lucas. So we're moving it maybe 20 or 30 feet. It's the next, it's the closest space, and it is in front of other businesses and restaurants, closer. It depends on where you're going, right? Totally depends on where you're going. If you're going, over to Walnut Street, it'll be
Further
30
away.
feet farther away. If you're going to Rice Valley, it'll be super convenient right in front, right? Councilor Bowman.
I was going to make the same point that there are a number of businesses there, including Shea Empanada, which is very popular. And there also is an accessible spot around the corner. Not that 2 isn't maybe not even enough for this space, but there's one around the corner on Walnut Street, near the corner of Walnut and Washington. It's still a very convenient spot, Jeannie, between the spot moving back. I know frequently we like to think about accessible spots being places that are easy to maneuver in and out. There's a driveway in between, so it'll be relatively easy to move in and out of, because there's that extra space where there's no parking. So I think from that aspect, it's still a really good spot to have be accessible.
Yeah, just to, and David, you can correct me, but the accessible space around the corner got moved further away from the businesses to the other side of the driveway that goes to just the back of some of the businesses, due to a bike lane being put in protected bike lane. So again, this whole area is served by, yes, 2 accessible spaces, but they are a distance away if anyone has any walking mobility issues with a walker or whatever. Maybe not as much, but maybe with a manual chair as well. So I just wanted to be sure they are going to be using it, and otherwise there's no reason to move it, in my opinion.
Right. Thank you for that comment. I suppose we could monitor it over the next summer. And if we find that it's not, that they don't take advantage of the space, someone can docket an item to move it back. But for now, our understanding is that they do want to be able to have outdoor dining. So we are trying to support our businesses.
Mhm.
And so that was why this item was docketed and why it's being recommended for approval. Any other comments on this item? Jeannie, did you still have a comment? You do have your hand. Okay.
No,
You can
I'm
put your
trying to
hand down.
lower it. It keeps bouncing up. I don't know.
Okay.
There we
All right.
go.
We
It
got
went
it.
down again. No,
Good.
that's all. I just wanted to, I wanted to be for sure. I wanted a reason and a reason that's going to take place because outdoor dining is winding down and it wouldn't be up until needed to be moved until next March if it's for next season. That's all.
Right. Okay, so thank you all for the comments. I think I am ready to go ahead and make a motion to approve the language as shown on slides 29 and slides 30 to swap the spaces. This would be a motion to approve the language of TPR 910. Any last comments? Okay, Scott, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Kozis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Mr. Doucette.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. So we have to wait for 20 days until November 15th. If there's no appeal, then sometime the second half of November, the two spaces will be swapped. So thank you very much. And we're going to
Thank
move
you.
on. You're welcome. We're going to move on now to item TC 5123. This is Shay Zanman, 145 Gibbs Street, requesting to change the current parking regulations on Gibbs Street from a 2-hour limit on the north side between Center Street and Dalton Road to a 1-hour limit except by resident permit on the north side between Center Street and Dalton Road. Okay, so I'm going to do the presentation, then we'll open it up for public comment. Here is Gibbs Street, just to the north of Newton Center, shown in the red polygon. This is looking east from Center Street, 23 feet wide. And then looking at the other end to the north from Everett Street, it's also 23 feet wide on that side. So it's a little bit narrower than the typical 24-foot wide street in Newton. The existing parking regulations are that there's no parking on the south side, the side shown in red, the entire length. And then on the north side is a 2-hour limit along the entire stretch. So if you're a resident on the street, you have restricted use of the street, a 2-hour limit, but it does allow short visits within the 2-hour limit. So the proposed parking regulation would be to change the 2-hour limit so that it becomes a 2-hour limit except by resident permit. So if you are a resident who lives in one of these parcels that abuts Gibbs Street, you would be able to go to the traffic bureau after the signs are changed that would now say 2-hour limit except by resident permit, and obtain resident stickers that would say Gibbs Street. They're $25 a year for each vehicle. And then you would be able to stick it onto your windshield and park on Gibbs Street for more than 2 hours for the whole day. You'd also be entitled to 2 free visitor placards, which are transferable placards. So if your guests come, you would give them the placard. You have to remember, to put it in your windshield, or you might be ticketed if you park more than 2 hours. Okay, so our recommendation is to approve the request. We have the language to make that happen, removing the existing 2-hour limit and adding in a 2-hour limit. Actually, it should really say from Center Street to Everett Street. So that would be the language a 2-hour limit on the north side from Center Street to Everett Street, except by resident permit. This is just a note that in, how do I say this? In Newton Highlands, we have a program where employees are able to get a limited number of permits to park on the nearby streets, like one or two, a few permits would go to the residents. We don't have that program in Newton Center at all. We have a different kind of program right now for employees in Newton Center, where we actually reserve a certain number of meters only for employees to park in. So this note just says, if something changes in the future, that this type of program that we have in Newton Highlands is developed for Newton Center, it could be that all the streets nearby would have something similar, where a few where a few employees would be able to get permits to be able to park on Gibb Street. That does not exist right now. There's no plans right now for any program like that, and it would also need to go through Traffic Council or City Council to be approved. But I just wanted to add that note for the record. So, but right now, our recommendation is to allow the 2-hour limit except by resident permit. And if that is approved, we would just need to wait until after November 15th, after the appeals period, to be able to have the signs installed. And once the signs are in place, you'd be able to go and get your resident permits and, you know, the stickers and the placards. Okay, we're going to open it up now. I see Councilor Bowman. Did you want to start out?
Sure. Thank you very much for that great summary. The Ward 6 councilors asked for this note to be included because, you know, I think for a matter of equity with Newton Highlands, and actually Newtonville also has a similar permit program where there are resident permits on the street that allow people to override, but they're also sharing the streets through the Tiger permit program. And, you know, I think it's a matter of equity, and I think it's good planning. I can certainly appreciate today there's a lot of parking in that first block between Center and Sumner. This is my neighborhood for anyone who's on here for this item, but not a lot of parking beyond that. So, you know, happy to see the residents supported here, but just wanted to make sure that, you know, just as a matter of equity with other streets in other areas, that that if we were to adopt that type of program, and it included Gibb Street, it may not include Gibb Street, but if it did, there might be some sharing here, but all within reason and still allowing lots of room for neighbors to park. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bowman. We're going to open it up for anyone, any member of the public who wishes to speak. Now's your chance to raise your hand and we can call on you. Okay, I don't see anyone. No hands raised, I think. Okay. So members of Traffic Council, any comments? Anyone like to make a motion? Okay, so I'll make a
I'll
motion.
make that motion.
Okay, good. So Councilor, let's see.
Downs.
Yes, yeah, I know. Councilor Downs has made a motion to approve the language of TPR 911 that would create the 2-hour limit except by resident permit. And we do have the draft TPR 911. If everyone sees it, we are making 2 changes on this draft, because under Gibb Street number 2, it says 2-hour limit north side from Center Street to Dalton Road. We really want to change that. So it says a 2-hour limit north side from Center Street to Everett Street. And then the same thing in the second number 2, a 2-hour limit north side. This is what we would be adding, a 2-hour limit north side from Gibb Street to Everett Street, except by resident permit as listed in TPR 202. So we're just changing Dalton Road to Everett Street in the TPR. Okay. Any last comments before Scott calls the roll? No? Okay, great. Scott, can you go ahead and call the roll, please?
Mr. Kozis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Mr. Doucette.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, so again, we're going to be waiting until November 15th. After that, then if there's no appeal, the new signs will be installed. When you see the signs that say accept by resident permit, that's your cue that it's time. You could go to the traffic bureau, or I guess you could wait until January because the permits are sold by the calendar year. So the permit would only be valid, I guess, for a month, a month and a half. And then you'd have to get another permit in January for 2024 to be able to park beyond the 2-hour limit. What else? So Scott, what we've been doing as of the last couple meetings, we've had several items like this lately. And so there's a letter that I have drafted that Danielle mail, or the clerk's office sends out to all of the abutters that live on the street after November 15th. We send that letter out that informs all the residents on the street that there's a change to the parking regulations and that they're entitled to get resident permits, and describes how they can do that. So I'm not sure who in the clerk's office, but that letter should go out sometime after November 15th, okay?
Yeah, we'll make sure that happens.
Okay, thank you. All right, so our next item is TC 4823. This is Councilors Kelly, Maliki, and Wright requesting to restrict parking on the north side of Watertown Street, 120 feet east of Davis Avenue, to improve intersection sightlines. Okay, so this is the area that we're talking about along Watertown Street near West Newton at Davis Avenue. Here's a view when you're coming sort of down Davis Avenue and trying to turn onto Watertown Street. This is looking to the east down Watertown Street. Here's a view. Okay. Actually, way back there, I just wanted to take a picture of, this is the measuring wheel. I measured how far 120 feet is from Davis Avenue, and it's actually quite far down there. That's where 120 feet is. This is looking from the opposite direction. So this is looking to the west with Davis Avenue up here, and this is where the measuring wheel is. So it's 120 feet from this point up to Davis Avenue. So we have 4 cars that are parked, and then the no parking zone starts right there. The utility pole is 110 feet from Davis. I guess this is actually Davis Avenue, right? Not Davis Street. So that's 110 feet right there at the utility pole. So I have 2 different options that we can talk about. The first option is to take, this is where the no parking here to corner sign is. We could, and so there's about 40 feet right now between the no parking sign and Davis Avenue. So the sight lines are not very good when you're turning off of Davis Avenue onto Watertown Street. So one option would be to move that sign 20 feet back so that you'd be 60 feet from Davis Avenue. That vehicle would no longer be there. Parking would still remain for the other 3 cars shown in this photo. So that should open up the sight lines. A lot of intersections around the city, we have about 50 feet of no parking right near the corner. So this would be 60 feet. That's option 1. We would maintain the parking for these 3 cars. And we have the language to be able to vote on that if that's the preferred option. Then option 2 would be to increase the no parking zone, to move that no parking here to corner sign 70 feet up to post it on this utility pole. That would be option 2. That would restrict parking for these 3 cars and allow parking to begin, just to the east of the utility pole. So that's quite a long distance of no parking. So basically it's 4 car lengths, the one that already exists plus 3 more car lengths. So that would be 110 feet of no parking. And we have the language to approve that one if we want as well. To remove the restriction that's only 40 feet from Davis Avenue and insert instead 110 feet of no parking. Okay, so that's the presentation that we have. I'm going to open it up now for public comment or for city councilors. Is it C. Pappas?
Yes, hi, my name is Charlie. I live on 74 Davis Ave. I live on the border of the parking area that's being discussed.
Okay.
Yeah, this has been a problem for a really long time. Because the street is like back a little, if you can kind of tell from the picture, it's really impossible to take a left turn if any kind of car is in that area. I'm really happy that you had the picture of that truck, because it was parked there for a week. It was impossible to get out of this street without having to inch out. It was almost like having to pull out in like downtown Boston in rush hour, because you really are totally blind if a car is parked in a certain area. Personally, I don't think just removing to that truck is enough unless you can limit trucks parking there. It would have to be 2 cars at a minimum, because as it is right now, it is very dangerous if a high truck parks there. So
Thank you for that comment.
yeah, no, just to add, my wife lives at home. She constantly hears beeping because of people having to inch out, and for whatever reason, because of West Union Square recently, like the changes, people really are speeding down. So you have to inch out, and if you don't inch out, there will be an accident. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We did receive 2 emails, and actually another one. We received a third just before the meeting, that we're all in support of restricting parking to some extent, further than the 40 feet that it's restricted now. Anyone else from the public wish to speak on this? Brett McLaughlin, sorry. Brett McLaughlin.
So I'm another neighbor a few doors down from Mr. Pappas. So yeah, like we put our lives in our own hands every time when we make a left here, and what's even complicated is that even visibility looking the other way isn't all that great, and cars are zooming on this road at 40 miles an hour, and it's just every day. I mean, it's just a matter of time before there's a big wreck. But I certainly just wanted to say that I support the comments made earlier that that 1 car alone would certainly take the curse off it, but I think more is needed. I would say there has to be at least 2 car lengths back, or else sooner or later, it's gonna end in a crash. So I definitely have lunged out of there many times where you just have to take the plunge because you can't see what you're doing and you just hope for the best. But yeah, so I would say, as somebody who lives on the street, I would say if it's possible to remove 2 cars rather than just 1. So I guess that means the second motion. I think that would be, or actually, I'm sorry, there were 2 motions. Would the first motion eliminate? That was just eliminate the first car, right? It was like 1 car versus 3 cars. Is that right? Those are the 2 options.
I mean, just to clarify, already there's no parking 2 car lengths, because that's 40 feet of no parking. So the first motion would be to remove this vehicle. Right, so 20 more feet. Okay. That should improve sight lines, just doing that. Then the second motion would be to remove quite a bit of parking all the way back to the utility pole. Or we could try one thing first. We do try to do the least restrictive changes at Traffic Council and see if it works before we, do something more severe. So but I want to hear what other members of Traffic Council think, and other members of the public if you have comments.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Other members of the public? If you, okay, Counselor Bowman.
Do you know what the speeds are along here? Because of course that makes the difference of how much is safe to set back. I was actually just looking for the calculation. As someone who has to, what?
I think it might be 40 miles an hour.
You mean the
Well,
average speed? No, I mean, certainly it's not the posted speed limit, but.
I mean, we did
Um,
recently, of course, put a stop sign in on Watertown Street further down. Maybe, I don't know, Isaac, if you have any data at your fingertips in terms of, because maybe
So I
something's
just
measured
was
for
going to
the stop
repeat.
sign. Yeah.
Yeah, I would repeat that Isaac, I think, could tell us, but the faster the vehicles are going, the more important it is to set the more important that we daylight that intersection further. As someone who has to routinely pull out, I now have a very small car, so I have to make a right onto Com Ave, but on where people are going 35 to 40 miles an hour, and I get it. It's really hard to do. So it's, that plays a factor in here as well, that the faster cars are going, the more sight line you need. So that was just going to be my thought. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Bowman. I think one thing to throw out there is, that earlier this year, Traffic Council approved adding more meters onto Watertown Street in West Newton. So I think what I observed is immediately, as soon as the parking meters were added, just very close on the other, just maybe half a block to the west, that was an area that was heavily parked up, right? And as soon as the meters went in, we noticed that cars parked just as close as just to the closest spaces that were not metered. So I think that we started seeing more cars parking along this block. And so as soon as you restrict parking, it's not like those cars are not going to come. They're just going to park further down in front of other people's houses, right? So that's one thing just to keep in mind. I don't know if there's parking restrictions on Davis Avenue, if the cars
on one side of the street.
on one side. So, you might see more cars starting to park on Davis Avenue, the more cars that are removed from Watertown Street, or further down Watertown Street. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, so I can jump in here.
Isaac.
So the regulatory speed limit on Watertown Street in this stretch is 35 miles per hour. That's a MassDOT special speed regulation. Just to note for folks that cities do not establish special speed regulations. That's the state for everywhere in the state. Data nearby, we do have the 85th percentile speed, which is considered the prevailing speed. So that's like the traffic engineering study speed. That's 36 miles an hour. That the speed does factor into the sight distance calculation. The 120 feet was, at the time of my recommendation, just what I took to get to the utility pole. My goal was just to limit signposts that would be needed. I'm certainly fine with going down to the utility pole. I don't think there's such parking demand continuing down Watertown Street towards Albemarle that there's an issue with moving folks back a little bit. So I'm honestly fine with either option. I just wanted to add sort of how I got to the original recommendation. Yep.
Thank you, Isaac. So you prefer option 2, but you're okay with option 1?
I am, yep.
Okay. Councilor Kelly.
Thanks. I'll just speak as one of the docketers of this item. 120 feet did seem quite far to me, so I was interested to see that your options were both less than that. And I'm happy to hear Isaac speak that he would be in favor of the one moving it back to the utility pole, which would eliminate 3 parking spaces rather than just the 1 and rather than 4. And, I too would be fine if Traffic Council decided to move in that direction. I think that's a big help still to the people trying to pull out of Davis Ave and take a left eastbound. To have those 3 cars removed will really help the visibility. So thanks for weighing in, Isaac. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor. Mitch.
Yeah, I think I support what Councilor Kelly said, and I think I think that area, what do I know about speed? But it seems like, you're starting to get into West Newton Square, and I think, going to the utility pole is probably sufficient. I mean, if that's still a problem, I think, someone could come back, but, I sort of view these things as whatever the minimum needed to accomplish the problem, to address the problem.
Okay, so Mitch, just to be clear, the utility pole is option 2, so that's a higher parking restriction. That would be removing 3 cars versus option 1, which is less restrictive. That would
Yeah,
remove 1 car.
Option 1 is what I'd support. Yeah.
Okay, so you would support the lesser parking restriction, which would move that sign. This whole sign would just be picked up and moved 20 feet probably.
That would be it. Yep.
Okay, and there would still be 2 cars between that new sign and the utility pole. Next, I see Jeremy.
Yep, I was going to say the same thing as Mitch. We can start with the least restrictive and maybe even do a trial of option 1, so we know we have to come back and revisit it if we need, if it's going well or not. Because I think option 2 doesn't hurt anyone, but I think it's good to start with the minimum and not create more trouble if we don't need it.
Thank you for that, Jeremy. A trial could be a good idea. If we decide to try to see what happens if we go the less restrictive route of moving it 20 feet, we could do that immediately. We don't have to wait 20 days. We could see how it goes, see if that clears up the sight lines well enough. And it's not a permanent vote, it's a trial. So everybody would be notified again, and we would have another traffic council meeting to sort of hear how everyone's feeling about it and whether that's sufficient or whether there's the feeling that we need to extend it, the no parking zone, all the way to the utility pole. I think that could be a good option. So thank you, Jeremy. Captain Doucette.
I just support what Jeremy basically just said. Let's do the less restrictive, put it in for a trial, and then if it's not fixing the problem, we can readdress it.
Thank you. Councillor Malachy.
Thank you. I was just wondering, did you have the opportunity to get a picture of what it looked like if you just removed the 1 space, but then the next space were occupied by a truck or something larger than an average car?
Well, I couldn't take a picture of that because every time I went there,
it was full.
Truck was parked all the way up to the no parking here to corner sign.
Okay, the truck was in the nearest space that would go away. So
yeah.
If you presumably went to the 1 space reduction, you'd very likely find that same truck parked where the
right there
gray car is now.
Probably so.
Okay,
and then that would be a good test to see, are the sight lines adequate?
Okay. Yeah, I just I guess I don't have a strong feeling either way. I guess my guess is that the feedback from the neighbors sounds like they don't expect 1 space to actually be enough, especially if it does happen to be that truck. But I guess if you try it and it doesn't work, you can always move it back.
It reminds me of several other, I can remember several other similar cases. Right, and like the first thing I thought of was that we did a trial of removing parking on Washington Street right at Hovey Street, maybe last year. That was in front of the Walgreens right over there. And we went with the least restrictive first as a trial, and it seemed to be adequate and it was made permanent. So I don't know what would happen here, but maybe we'll find out. So Councillor Downs.
Councillor Malachy kind of had the same thought that I had, which is why I think a trial is a good idea. The bug I wanted to put into all of our ears for us to think about is speed on this street and whether this street would be a good candidate for lowering the speed limit in this area from 35 down to the city speed limit of 25. I know it's a long process, but we've done it once now and we were successful. So I'd love to hear my colleagues' thoughts on that, perhaps offline and not tonight, but I wanted to raise that.
Thank you,
No,
Councilor Downs.
yeah, I'm happy to quickly comment that. I mean, I think generally we should be looking at our 35-mile-per-hour zones in the city. Those are the largest zones. It's just about being mindful of the fact that when something becomes a statutory speed limit, we cannot post regulatory speed limit signs. So that's sort of where it makes me a little bit hesitant that it's that alone, just rescinding 35-mile-per-hour doesn't alone fix an issue.
Right, it doesn't make the street, I mean, you aren't able to put up city signs saying, by the way, the default here is 25 miles an hour. But it sort of sets the expectation for the city as we move forward that that's actually the speed you should be going, and we should design for that, since it's clearly the problem for the neighbors turning out of Davis is the speed of the cars coming in toward West Indian Square here.
Yeah, good food for thought.
All right, thank you. Councilor Kelly.
Be really quick. You have convinced me that a temporary trial is a very good way to start by doing the least restrictive. So it looks like that's the direction you're headed. I just want to remind everybody that we counselors docket these items often based on the interests of our constituents, who are the ones who approach us and want as much as possible to help. And so that's where this originally came from. But I understand that you would want to start with perhaps just moving that first car. So one question, if it's going to be a trial, would you consider like striping out, painting that spot to make it even more visible that there's no parking there? Or is that too much to ask? Or is that not something you do with a trial? Or would you do it after the trial when it becomes permanent?
Well, we have the no parking here to corner sign. We do not see that people are parking beyond the no parking here to corner sign. So I don't know that it would be necessary to go through the effort of starting to paint, no parking zone in this place. I think if we just move the sign 20 feet, my guess is that people would, comply or be ticketed. Is that what you were going to say, Isaac?
Yeah, I think in the overwhelming majority of cases, striping hatch marks is excessive and not aesthetically pleasing, I would say, is a lot of comments we get on actions like that. So I would say let's give the sign a chance. Where we do have hatches around intersection corners in the city are areas where, there's a very clear-cut issue of poor compliance. So I wouldn't suggest that off the bat.
That's the answer I anticipated, but I did want to hear it from you professionals. I had to ask it. Thank you very much. I'm done.
Sure.
Thank you. And again, the good thing about a trial is we don't have to wait 20 days. We could, maybe not tomorrow, but maybe tomorrow or maybe next week, move that sign 20 feet and see, so that change could happen very quickly. Any other comments, or would anyone like to make a motion?
I just had a question. How long would a trial be?
It would be until it comes back on the traffic council agenda. So we have a lot of different items to be heard. If we're finding that it's not working, we're finding that it's not working, it would probably come back more quickly. Right?
Okay, yeah, just because my
or
neighbor's
any
been
trial
trying
could
for
be
over
ended.
a year.
Right? Say that again.
My neighbor's been trying for supposedly I talked to him this morning. He's been trying for a year to try to talk about this. So yeah, so I was just curious how long the trial would be and how long until it would be heard again. So that's all. Thank you.
Right. I mean, I would guess it would be heard sometime over the winter, maybe January, February, March or so.
Okay. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Councilor Bowman?
I was just going to make it clear that I think the option when the trial, after the trial, the trial will be either this is a far enough setback or we need to set it back even further. I don't think anybody thinks that the current setback is sufficient safety-wise. So this is a step And is it far enough? And if it's not far enough, then to set it further back. And I would encourage you to pay attention to compliance. Again, my neighborhood, we ended up having to stripe the section of Com Ave where we pull out. And that it's not perfect, but it does certainly seem to improve compliance. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Right. We'll want to hear from the neighborhood if things are not working, and we'll assume if we don't hear from you, that it's probably working just fine, and then we'll have a motion on the table to make the trial permanent. And so, please do let traffic council know, or let your counselors know that this needs to be revisited if you think it does, because that's the only way we know.
I'll do that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all. Does anyone want to make a motion for a trial?
I'll make the motion for a trial.
All right, we have a motion made by Councilor Downs to begin a trial as shown on slide 44, which would move the no parking here to corner sign 20 feet further to the east so that it would be 60 feet from Davis Avenue. All right. Scott, can you call the roll for the trial?
Mr. Kozis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Councilor Downs,
Aye.
Mr. Doucette.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. All right. So our next item is TC 4223. This is Christopher Bresky, 300 Highland Street, requesting the addition of a stop sign in both directions on Highland Street at the intersection of Lenox Street to create a four-way stop-controlled intersection. Note that multi-way stop control shall be based on an engineering study evaluating guidance listed in the MUTCD, the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So this is the location on West Newton Hill, Highland Street at Lenox Street. This is a view of the street looking toward Newton North High School, toward Newtonville. So we did several data analyses. We looked at turning movements at the intersection. We counted cars. We looked at crash data as well, and we compared these data against the MUTCD for multi-way stop guidance. Here's the turning movements. This was conducted in the AM peak. It was a half an hour count on October 17th between 8 a.m. and 8:30. We had a lot more traffic on Highland Street, 81% versus only 19% from Lenox Street. If you look at the numbers, they're very small number of vehicles in the AM peak coming off of Lenox Street. You can see in this chart, 8 vehicles coming down southbound and 3 northbound, and 4 pedestrians crossing. And then similar in the PM peak, 73% on Highland, 27% on Lenox. So not a huge volume. The speed limit is 25 miles an hour. We look at the 85th percentile to see the speed in which most vehicles are traveling, and that's 29 miles per hour. Average daily traffic volume is 726. There were 3 crashes that occurred over the past 5 years, from 2018 up until the summer of 2023. I think there was another one that happened since then. All were property damage. We did look at all 3 of these crash reports. They were all really different reasons, no consistent reason for why the crash happened. I guess the only consistent thing was driver inattention, right? That's what all the 3 police reports cited, driver inattention. There were no bicycle or pedestrian crashes during this 5-year period. So when we look at the MUTCD guidance, we look at all of these different factors and to see if any of these have a
Yeah, great.
criteria, meet the criteria. And none of the criteria were met, unfortunately, for a multi-way stop
Two
sign.
more items.
And this is just from the MUTCD, just to know that stop signs are meant really to define the right of way. It's not to be used to control speed. It's not a traffic calming device. And the MUTC guidance tells us that we do need to look at the criteria. The stop signs need to meet the warrants in order to go in. And unfortunately, they're not met in this case. So our recommendation here is to deny the request for stop signs at this location. Outside of the traffic council process, we do want to consider some improvements to the intersection to try to make it safer and reduce. We don't want to have any crashes occurring. So we thought, what can we do? And we came up with that we could paint crosswalks. We already have the ramps in place. So we should be able to paint, I think we were thinking painting 3 of the 4 crosswalks across, through the intersection, painting the stop bars that for the stop signs that are already there. We could add signage and request police enforcement for, the things that are causing the crashes, driver inattention. And, we do have the occasional speeder, although most vehicles are not speeding. We do have some vehicles that just are speeding. So police enforcement, and the police do have these signs that show what the speed is of the vehicles that are traveling through. So they rotate these around the city. And so we would recommend adding one from time to time onto Highland Street. So that is our recommendation to deny this request. We do have the 20-day appeals period. That's the presentation we have for this item, and I would welcome anyone from the public who wishes to speak. If you could raise your hand, and we can call on you. Chris Bresky.
Thank you. This is Chris Bresky. I live on the northeast corner of this intersection at 300 Highland Street. And I submitted this along with the 3 other families who reside at the intersection. 3 of us, 2 of the other houses and myself have young children. So I won't belabor this too long, as David was kind enough to stop by and chat with me and politely inform me there's, sort of no way that a 4-way stop's ever going in here. But, the point I want to emphasize is, based on the sort of standard metrics of, the frequency of accidents and the average speed and the volume of traffic and things like that, it's not those standard metrics that are the concern of the folks who live here. It's the nature of the accidents that are happening. So in the about 8 years that I've lived here, there's been 6 serious accidents. And I mean, not fender benders, but cars being taken away on flatbeds. In 2 of those incidents, cars have jumped the curb onto my lawn. In one case, traveling clear across the lawn. And that's really the concern of the folks here, that we're having these, relatively high speed, serious accidents occurring on our relatively quiet 25-mile-per-hour road. It's a very popular pedestrian thoroughfare. There's lots of kids riding their bikes, and seeing cars jump curbs and end up in folks' lawns is a little scary. So, as we put our heads together, we submitted this thinking a 4-way stop was sort of the easy, efficient solution. If that isn't the easy, efficient solution, and David mentioned some of these other things, I think we all want to know sort of how we move forward with this and follow through to see that some of these things, happen that can help this situation.
Thank you very much. Isaac, did you have any comments at this point, or should we go on to the next public comment?
Sure. I would just acknowledge that, some of those things we're very capable of doing in-house with our staff, like crosswalk markings, and signage, and, independent of traffic council, that's the type of work that we do in the city, with pavement markings and signage. So, when I see the crash history and I see mention of inattention, I do look at this optimistically as far as just what markings and signage do to raise awareness of intersections. So, that's a step that we can definitely proceed with regardless of this vote. I don't want it to appear dependent on traffic council. It's not. We definitely will try to get that done this fall. A lot of that work is weather dependent, and it's getting colder, and that does affect pavement marking application. But our aim is definitely to try to move ahead with those steps as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Isaac. Mills, right?
Yeah, thank you. I'm the neighbor across the street from Chris, at the corner, the kind of lower left of this image. And I live here with my wife and 3 kids, 2 boys, 4 and 2, and a baby girl, 11 months. I don't want to repeat anything that Chris said. I think he makes our points very well. I would just add that when I'm working in the yard or just outside, I feel like there's a lot of speeding that goes down Highland. It's about a half a mile stretch with no stop sign. It's a wide street. And, I think that has been kind of the theme in all the accidents is speeding. And, I just, when I'm doing work out there, I pay tons of attention. I don't like to be anywhere near that intersection when cars go by, and I'm always paying attention to cars that are approaching. And if 2 cars are approaching, I'm actually moving out of the way. So, if we can make this intersection safer and reduce the speeds, I think all of us would be, feel a lot better about our families living here.
Thank you for that comment. Captain Doucette, do you think that the Traffic Bureau would be able to do some enforcement on the street and rotate in some of your speed feedback signs?
Yep, I was just waiting to talk, so I
good.
want to know. I'm going to pass it on to my patrolman, and we'll have some increased enforcement, and we'll look to put a speed sign up when one becomes available.
Thank you, Captain Doucette. Councillor Downs.
Thanks, Chair. I agree with the residents. I mean, it's clearly a speed issue in here. This just looks like, if Maria Montessori wanted to design the hallway to run down, that street looks like the hallway to run down, and you're more likely to be lead-footed there. So let's look at some of the other things we can do to just get driver attention to it. That's always modifying painting crosswalks, painting stop bars, and doing a feedback display sign. Let's see how those work. Engineering is usually more effective than signage, and as much as I love enforcement, it's not a constant. It rotates, so it's not going to be there all the time. But let's see how that goes. Let's collect some data. Let's keep looking at this and come back. And if paint alone doesn't work, let's start brainstorming if this is a candidate for traffic calming.
Thank you, Councillor Downs. Mitch.
Yeah, following up on Councillor Downs, it strikes me that I think it's Fuller Street in the Dartmouth Street area, sort of the same kind of width. And seems to me, there's kind of a series of bump outs or neck downs, which actually seem quite hazardous to drivers, but it does slow you down, and they're mixed around a little bit. I mean, to me, that's the engineering solution. Again, depending on the budget is usually the killer in terms of putting it, in a longer delay situation. But I also think that, four-way stop signs here, I mean, even if it met the warrant, and David, you were recommending it, that may not be the answer. I mean, people would, be able to see pretty broadly, there's no cars coming, and they just eventually start going through the stop signs. So some kind of structural solution would seem to be, I think your other recommendations are good too, but, again, we don't have power over any of the stuff, but that was my gut feeling when I saw this.
Thank you for those comments, Mitch. Any other comments? Okay. Seeing none, we do have a recommendation to deny this request. Would anyone
I'll
like to
make
a
that motion if you want, Chair.
Okay. So we have a motion to deny this request. There would be no TPR number for it, denial. We do have the 20-day appeals period. Any last comments before we vote? Scott, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Coates,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Mr. Doucette.
Aye.
Motion is denied.
Thank you. All right, so our last item of the evening is TC 5023. This is Matthew Schuster, 99 Bowdoin Street, requesting stop signs at the intersection of Erie Avenue at Bowdoin Street in both directions. Okay, so this is another request for a multi-way stop. Here we are in Newton Highlands. This is a view of Erie Avenue looking to the west toward Woodward Street. This is two-way section of Erie Avenue. It becomes one way on the opposite side of Bowdoin Street. So this is one way westbound, and then we have Bowdoin Street, which is a two-way street. So the request would be to add a stop sign on Erie Avenue and add a stop sign at Bowdoin Street. And obviously no stop sign because it's one way to the west of Bowdoin Street. Analysis was conducted just like the previous item. Very, very low volume in the AM peak. Only 6 vehicles on Bowdoin, only 11 vehicles on Erie Avenue. And then also very low volume in the PM peak. The area is 25 miles per hour. That's the speed limit. Our 85th percentile is 26 miles per hour. So 85 out of 100 vehicles are traveling 26 miles an hour or less through this intersection. There were no crashes that were reported. So we looked at all of the warrants or the guidance, and again, none of these criteria were met. And again, stop signs are not meant to be a device to reduce speed. It's meant to establish right-of-way. That's what stop signs are for. So our recommendation for the multi-way stop, the stop in 2 directions, is to deny that request. But we are also, it's a little different from the previous item because this is also a T intersection from Bowdoin Street, where Bowdoin Street comes to the south, creates a T intersection right next to a park. So for T intersections, when we look at stop sign requests for stop signs, there are no official warrants that we look at in the MUTCD. You're supposed to be stopping at the end of Bowdoin. It's an implied stop. We don't need to add stop signs. It's not required, but we could because they are allowed. We do get a lot of these types of requests at Traffic Council. Just about every meeting, we have a request to put in a stop sign at a T intersection, and we usually do approve those because, well, first of all, it does clarify the right of way, who is supposed to stop at the T intersection, and we believe that it does provide for a small safety benefit, especially if it's near a playground or a park or a school or a pedestrian crossing. So in this case, we do recommend approving the stop sign at the end of Bowdoin Street. So we would have 1 stop sign at the end of Bowdoin Street and no stop signs on Erie Avenue. So that is our recommendation, to approve the stop sign only on Bowden Street in the southbound direction. And so that's the presentation. I see Councilor Bowman, you have your hand raised.
Yes, the Ward 6 counselors are strongly supportive of the stop sign going at the end of Bowden Street. I can understand concern. I can understand why it was requested to have a stop sign in Erie as well, but certainly at the end of Bowden Street makes a great deal of sense. And I'm glad that you're putting it in, recommending to put it in. Thank you.
Thank you. Matthew Schuster.
Thank you. Thank you for taking this into consideration. We live on that corner, on the Bowden Street corner. And Diane and I, my wife, have been here for 26 years. We've raised 3 children here. And now we're seeing the influx of several new households with young children just this year. The other observation, and I will say, I thanks to the traffic department for putting the crosswalks in only in the past year. Unfortunately, our observation has been that it has not changed the pattern that has increased in recent years, which is of Erie Avenue being used as a conduit for folks who seem to be wanting to avoid Lincoln Street or Route 9. A lot of sort of through traffic for that reason, coupled with pretty high pedestrian traffic, which is seasonal. I'm not sure if the times where you were checking reflects how busy this place is in the summer months or during good weather, with not just small children from the neighborhood, but there are 2 preschools within a couple of blocks of this area that regularly use this area. The summer concerts that John Rice puts on, you may be familiar with. So it may be higher than those low numbers suggest. I think the experience of residents who live there is that periodically they do see high-speed vehicles coming down, even if it's not the average. And I realize stop signs aren't really for that purpose. I think the issue really is the conflict with pedestrians and car traffic as well, people coming and going from all the events on the field, Little League and all the rest of it. So I'm happy to hear about the one stop sign, but I think even our stronger safety concern is the egress of cars continuing down Erie Avenue without stopping, or without necessarily being slow enough to respect the crosswalks.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Any other comments from the public? Let me see. So I see Diane Schufro.
Hi, I'm also at the corner of Bowden and Erie, and I just wanted to add that I and many of the neighbors have noticed in the last couple of years that the speed at which cars are going down Erie Avenue towards Route 9 or towards Woodward Street is very fast. And that's all.
Right. So we did look at this. We did look at the volumes, which were not close to meeting a warrant. They were well, even if it was much busier, in the summer, still not near the volume that would be required. The speeding, again, we have the 85th percentile. Of course, what that means that 15% of cars are traveling recklessly, traveling unsafely, well above the limit. But 85 out of 100 cars are traveling the speed limit at 26 miles an hour or less. That was the data that we collected in November of this year. I see Stuart Snyder.
Yes, hi, Stuart Snyder. I live at 30 Erie Avenue. I'll be very brief. I just want to echo Matt Schuster's comments and Diane's as well, and urge the council to adopt your proposal to put the stop sign at the end of Bowden. I understand the impediments to putting a stop sign on Erie Avenue, even though I would be in favor of that as well, but
Especially with all the cars.
that's Abby Cohen speaking. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you for that comment. All right. I see another hand raised, but I don't see a name, but I see 2 people in the image. So you could unmute yourself and say your name and address, please. Oh, now I see it. It says ST inside Karen?
Yes, this is Stuart Karen, and I live next to Stuart Snyder on Erie Ave. And in the picture that you took on Erie Ave, looking west towards Woodward, if you had backed up about 30 feet, you'd see a walkway through a gate, through a fence opening into a very heavily used park. John Rice does a terrific job, and there are a lot of small children that play there, including preschool kids. And while your data from that one time show that the 85th percentile might have been 26 miles an hour, there are any number of cars that come by going at least 40 by the time they get to that opening, very fast, headed down towards Woodward. And given the opening in the fence and small children running through that opening, it is just going to be an accident waiting to happen with a small child enjoying the park, running out to a car on the other side of Erie Avenue when people park. And I understand that the policy is that stop signs aren't to be used for this purpose. However, this is an accident waiting to happen, and a child is going to get killed running out of the park if you don't take action to reduce the speed. And putting a stop sign on Erie Avenue would do just that. But if the bureaucratic solution is not to do that, then would you come up with another way to get cars to slow and not go 40, 45 miles an hour down Erie? Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Downs.
Yeah, thank you. So this is a park, and we have new legislation, state legislation we can leverage to lower the speed limit here to 20 miles an hour, make it a safety zone, as we have done on the other side of the park on Lincoln. So I have just started the process to do that. But I would support the one stop sign, and I would also support us continuing to monitor this until we can get the safety zone approved.
Okay. So Councilor Downs, you're thinking about possibly docketing an item for traffic council to establish a safety zone on Erie Avenue. We would look to make sure it meets the requirements. Seems like it might, off the top of my head. That would allow a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, signs that would say safety zone 20 miles an hour at the beginning and end of where that safety zone would be established on Erie Avenue.
Right. It would need to be on either side of the park, with the park being the center, and I think it's a quarter mile on either side. We've done a number of these, including the one on Lincoln Street. Clearly, this is a great candidate for one on the other side, as we're hearing about kids crossing the street. It's one of the cheapest things we can do, and I've just sent Isaac an email to start that process, and then we'll docket it before Traffic Council if he thinks it's warranted.
Thank you, Councilor Downs.
Yeah,
Mitch.
If the resident wants to speak up before me, that's fine.
Mr. Karen, did you still have your hand up? Did you have any further comments?
No, I don't, and I'm sorry to keep my hand up. I do thank the lady who just spoke to take the children's safety to heart. There is a traffic zone on the other side of Lincoln. Cars go very fast, maybe not to 85%, but after that, cars go very fast down Erie Avenue. And we've lived here for a number of years, and it worries the heck out of me watching kids running out of the park across the street. Thank you.
Thank you. Mitch.
So I mean, I support the stop sign at Erie, but I had two other thoughts. One is that,
Do you mean to say that you would support the stop sign on Bowdoin?
I'm sorry, Bowdoin, not Erie. But I had two thoughts. One is, when you have a stop sign like this, and then you have that one-way portion that goes out to Woodward, that might actually increase the speed of traffic going through that intersection as people realize that who's ever over there has to stop. So I sort of worry about that. And then I guess the other is that, you know, even with the 20 miles an hour, there needs to be enforcement. And, you know, people have to start slowing down there. And if they aren't, and, you know, if there, God forbid, is an accident, I think, you know, you need a structural thing maybe to narrow that corner location to announce to people that they can't just go through quickly.
Thank you. Of course, traffic council, again, we have no budget. We don't have a budget to do any sort of traffic calming. That's a whole different process. We do have a budget to put up stop signs. That's about it. In terms of what traffic council could actually vote on and approve. Really, we make changes to our traffic and parking regulations. We don't approve traffic calming here in this group. I see Stuart Snyder, you have your hand up. No?
Yes,
Oh,
I'm
yes.
sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, this is Abby Cohen. I live with Stuart Snyder. And we've lived here for 27 years and have raised our children. It's lovely, the image now, but what the reality is that parked cars are there all the time, which narrows the street. And we have two-way traffic coming off of Bowdoin on this part of Erie, closer to at the front. And children are crossing the street, and the cars coming from Hartford Street accelerate on their way down, knowing that Erie is going to there's no impediment going all the way down to Woodward. So there's no other way to stop the traffic than having a stop sign there. So putting a 20-mile-an-hour sign is fine, but I can't imagine that the cars are actually going to slow down. They just seem to just put their foot on the pedal and go.
Thank you for that comment.
I've been out gardening and had to, many times had to ask cars to slow down so that kids can cross.
I guess the only thing that I would say is that, you know, having parked cars on the street and narrowing the street is probably a good thing. If the main concern is about the speed of traffic, right? You have the parked cars, it narrows it down. Cars need to go through slower. You know, if there were no parked cars on the street, I think that the cars would probably travel even faster if there's nothing to stop them. So I guess the easiest thing to do is continue to park cars on the street and try to slow traffic down that way. Matthew Schuster.
I thank you. Actually, I agree with you that when there are more parked cars, which tends to be middle and late afternoon playground use, things are slower. The morning rush and the evening rush, where people are trying to get past the log jam on Route 9 or on Lincoln Street, is when the speeds are higher. And when kids are going back and forth, there's a school bus stop actually right on that corner of Erie and Bowdoin, which is our house, and there's a lot of foot traffic there. I wanted to just wonder, is there an option? I understand the regulations about stop signs. If there's going to be just one stop sign, I would propose that the most effective for safety would be a stop sign in the foreground of this photo, sort of in front of the telephone pole there, because the traffic coming down from Bowdoin does slow down when it gets to that T. Some don't stop, some look. Sometimes we've seen a number of near misses, but the high speed really is the Erie Avenue. That's the danger I worry about the most with these small children. Is that an option to consider one stop sign there as opposed to one on the other corner?
I don't think that that's an option. We were looking at putting in a stop sign at the T intersection. This is the slide that talks about when, why we would be able to put a stop sign in at a T intersection. Erie Avenue is not a T intersection, but Bowdoin is. Bowdoin ends at Erie Avenue at the T. And so that's why we could put the stop sign at that T intersection. Isaac, did you have any, did I describe that right? Is there anything that I said wrong so far?
No, you're correct. And the Erie Ave would not be the correct interpretation of the T approach to the intersection, and therefore it would fall under the multi-way stop rules.
Which none of the criteria are met.
Correct.
Councilor Bowman.
I just wanted Isaac to maybe make it clear, because I'm not sure it is to some of the neighbors, that these aren't Newton's rules. These are rules that are standards that are set as a national standard that we have to comply with. So I just wanted to make that clear. And sometimes they're a little frustrating and you want them to be different. But these are rules that we generally follow just to be in compliance. So
yeah, I mean, it's a very nuanced discussion, but if I would sort of try to condense it down into a couple of sentences, anything that's in the MUTCD, was thoroughly studied before becoming any type of regulation. That's how everything makes it into that document. When it comes to stop signs, the ones that are not warranted tend to be the ones with the lowest compliance rates. When stop signs are poorly positioned, unfortunately, people do just end up speeding right back up after them. There's some other factors to consider, such as increased noise pollution with vehicles stopping. And honestly, a couple other things that may happen, such as changes in traffic patterns to avoid the stop sign, so increased cut through traffic of other streets. So in that scenario, you're just moving the problem elsewhere. So that's part of why that guidance is put together, just to make sure we're making an informed decision.
Right. So this is the MUTCD. It's not a Newton regulation. It's not a state. It's the whole nation. It's federal regulations based on decades of experience, and which is why you don't want to put a stop sign in on Highland Avenue or on Erie Avenue or in a place that does not meet the warrants, because they get ignored. People will just run right through stop signs that don't meet the warrants, and it would create in our judgment and in the MUTCD clearly, it would create a more dangerous situation by putting a stop sign in when it's not warranted. Did you still have another comment, Mr. Schuster? You have your hand up still.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Downs.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to make this motion. But we'll also note that I'm part of several groups that work hard to change the MUCTD, the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, when their recommendations are more for the prioritization of traffic and speed rather than safety. So we do know that while we follow their guidance and have to follow their guidance, we don't necessarily 100% agree with them on everything. I think on the stop sign one, we probably do. But this is the problem on Erie as it looks right now, is that there are not very many things to slow a driver down, and it's straight. And we as humans see it straight away and take it at speed, tend to go faster than if we see a curve or if we perceive some danger of damaging ourselves or our cars. And so that's what, in the long run, will need to be done on straight streets by playgrounds like this.
I'll just add a couple more things. David, can we just note, So especially in regards to the pedestrian crossing concern, the crossing across Erie, the one that is under free flow condition, that's appropriate to install the the standard static pedestrian crossing warning signs. So assuming that this photo is correct, that means those signs have not been installed yet. So that's something we can look at and note. And then to answer Mitch's question, for the he pointed out Erie Ave where it begins at Hartford Street and just at what speed folks are accessing the street. For the folks, I don't want to open up a whole discussion on the Highlands Ave project. That's not the time for this, but I do just want to note for the folks that are familiar with the working concepts of that village project, there is a pretty substantial intersection narrowing and corner radii reduction conceptualized for that intersection of Erie and Hartford that would then in turn affect the street in a positive way in the future.
Mr. Snyder?
Yeah, forgive me. One other quick question. I'm just curious. Could you put that image back up where the stop sign is going to go? And maybe you answered this when you said there's no budget for traffic calming measures, but I've seen in other places creative painting on roads that creates the illusion of something that causes people to slow down as they approach it. I'm sure you're familiar with this. I'm just wondering whether that's anything that could be considered for the area there right in front where Bowdoin meets Erie, or really primarily on Erie. Do you know what I'm referring to?
I'm not too
You
sure what
mean
you're
to
referring
have
to.
something besides a crosswalk?
Like
Yeah,
like
no,
3D painted, like they're
Yeah.
painted that they look like they're 3D.
Yeah,
So that
Well,
yeah.
I mean,
yes,
first of
that's
all, that's
exactly
not
right.
a traffic council discussion, right?
Yeah.
What we're here to talk about is the stop sign. Traffic council, we only vote to make changes to our traffic and parking regulations. We
Okay.
don't really, we're not in charge of line painting. I don't know if Isaac, you want to say anything about having one intersection in the city that has something different than the whole rest of the city?
I would just say in general, pavement markings are subject to MUTCD as well. Any type of 3D designs are explicitly prohibited. We are not going to do anything like that. There are pavement marking measures that do have some marginal traffic calming effects. We can have that discussion elsewhere. If there's poor compliance on stop signs and crash history, for example, sometimes we add stop text, but I'm not sure that would be required to begin here. So maybe I would just table those discussions for later.
Thank you, Isaac. Okay, so we do have a motion made by Councilor Downs to approve the language shown on slide 71. This would be to approve the stop sign on Bowdoin Street southbound at Erie Avenue. That would be TPR 912, I think. Yes, so TPR 912. That motion was made by Councilor Downs. Are there any last comments before we vote? Okay, Scott, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kozis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Councilor Downs,
Aye.
Mr. Doucette,
Aye.
motion approved.
All right. So again, we have our 20-day appeals period. We need to wait until after November 15th, assuming no one's going to appeal the stop sign. After the latter half of November, we would first go through the DigSafe process, make sure it's safe to install the stop sign there, and then the stop sign should be installed the latter half of November. So thank you all. That concludes all of our items. I think that our next traffic council meeting is going to be on December 14th. So thank you all and have a good night.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Scott.
Yep.
filling in.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.